Right, today I've come to London, to do a little bit of work, and I've managed to find a few sites in between where I've been going, what I've been doing. I must apologise in advance, I didn't bring my Steadicam because I wasn't expecting to be able to film anything, but I did have a little bit more free time than I thought, so I was able to record some odds and ends. So I'd like to apologise about any little bit of shaking, but hopefully you will enjoy all the little things I was able to see. So this is the monument to the Great Fire of London. It was constructed from 1671 to 1677 and is placed at almost the spot where the Great Fire of London came to a close, the corner of the city that survived. There's an allegorical sculpture here showing Charles II coming to aid the fallen figure of Londinium, aided by God. It's really quite royalist. But it's a very impressive scale, and would have been more impressive in its day, as it's now surrounded by similarly tall London buildings. You can go up into the tower, but I won't because it's very claustrophobic inside. But it's quite impressive. I'm glad to have finally seen it in the flesh. Every time I've come past here before, it has been covered in scaffolding. This obelisk dates from 1500 BC in the city of Heliopolis. It was decorated on the outside 200 years later by Ramesses II, or Ramesses the Great, and it was then moved by the Ptolemies to the region of Alexandria in some time around 300 to 0 BC. It was forgotten and lost and fell over in the sands, but in 1819, Muhammad Ali, no, not that one, the Viceroy of Egypt, gifted this to the British people as a recognition of the contributions of the British to keeping Egypt free of Napoleon. Unfortunately, it was lost in a storm in the Bay of Biscay on its route to England and had to be recovered in the 1870s when it was brought here to London, where it was erected and now stands. And 1500 BC, incidentally, was around the time that people were thinking that Stonehenge was pretty great. So that gives you an idea of just about how long ago that was. A final note on the obelisk and these lines. These scars in the metalwork are from German bombs, but not World War II like you might think. This was a bomb dropped on London on the 4th of September 1917. And so this is the church of St Magnus the Martyr, just by London Bridge in London. It's a Christopher Wren church dating from just after the Great Fire of London, and it is wonderfully high church. You don't see many Church of England churches this heavily decorated. This is the chapel for the Worshipful Company of Fishmongers and the Worshipful Company of Plumbers, two of the guilds here in London. And it's just remarkably decorated. Beautiful work. I'm here at Advent, so you can see their Advent candles are counting down. I don't know if this is a tradition in other countries, but a lot of churches in England have a little Advent candle calendar. This type of church design with a gallery for the choir and the organist, and then a large open nave with a Roman arch roof was very common around the 1600s, and Christopher Wren loved that style of church and so massively popularised it when he was given the task of rebuilding the churches that were destroyed in the Great Fire of London, as this one was. This is a fire engine dating to just after the Great Fire of London. The Great Fire of London highlighted the problems with fighting fires in the city, and part of that problem was that all the pumps were very large and bulky machines, so this was created as a much smaller, lighter machine that could be easily manoeuvred through the cramped streets of London and get to where it needed to be to put out the fires. And it's lovely to see one here in this church. The church has a wonderfully airy look to it, but unfortunately modern London has sprung up all around it, so it doesn't get as much light and air as it once did. But it's still a testament to the skill of Christopher Wren making a building that could feel so open and light, even though it is swamped on all sides in what used to be one of the highest towers around. And up here you get a really great sense of how St Magnus the Martyr has been enveloped by its neighbours. And this lovely thing is just outside the church of St Magnus the Martyr. This is a piece of wood from the Roman wharf, which would have been not far from here. And it's one of those wonderful English things of, we found a historic thing, let's tape it to another historical thing. As an example of change in the city, this is the outside of St Magnus the Martyr, and the waterline of the river used to be just on its side, and all of this was built up as a Victorian embankment. Over there is London Bridge, and in the 1700s there used to be a clock on the side of St Magnus, which was put there by a carter who had wasted so much of his life on London Bridge in the congestion. He said he wanted there to be a clock for all to see, so that they would know exactly how much of their life they had wasted on that bridge. So this is a model of the London Bridge as it would have appeared in about 1400. This is the Southwark side. London Bridge in those days had lots of houses built over the river hanging off the bridge. That was part of the City of London's defences. And you can see there are lots and lots of archways along here. This current would be incredibly fast, and so this is often known as shooting the bridge to go through there. Oh, I went past this one. This is a feature that doesn't exist at all anymore, and I don't believe the island does either. This was a chapel to Thomas à Becket, and pilgrims coming from London or the north down to Canterbury would stop here to pray for the saint's protection on their journey and give thanks for getting this far. And the water was so fast under these archways that at one point in the 1500s they put a water wheel in to power a mill and also to pump water into the city in elm pipes. And then this is the London side, and where this model is created is right here, just off the model. This is the church of St Magnus the Martyr, and this was created by I've forgotten his name, one of the members of the company, Worshipful company of Plumbers, David Taggart, that's his name. And this tremendously boring edifice of concrete is London Bridge, the same site as the London Bridge from the medieval period and the Roman period, the most famous bridge that ever there was, because London Bridge is falling down. It is a box girder bridge from 1973, which replaced an 1831 bridge that itself replaced a medieval bridge that itself replaced a Roman bridge. The 1830 bridge was built because of the tremendous congestion of the medieval bridge, and it now in Arizona, of all places. It was sold to a gentleman in Arizona who decided to make it into a tourist attraction for his town, and it does unfortunately mean that London Bridge is now the least interesting bridge across the Thames. However, if you just sweep your eyes from London Bridge, you can see the infinitely more interesting Tower Bridge. This is the London Stone at Cannon Street. According to legend, this stone came from Troy, and people say that as long as the stone of Brutus stands, London shall never fall. This is of course nonsense and was made up by Victorian romantics, but it's probably Roman. Its geology means that it has to be from at least 60 miles away. It's a limestone block, there is no limestone here. And it was probably a standing stone. It used to stand in the middle of the street, and it was eventually moved into a protective space, and it became a symbol of London's foundation. Another legend about it is that it was raised by King Lud, a mythical king of the Saxons who supposedly rebuilt London. Again, not true, but a nice legend. Certainly it is a very old stone and symbol of the city. Right, this is the York Watergate, which was the Watergate for York House, which used to be just over there. Cast your mind back 400 years and none of these buildings were here. This area of London, which is in the West End, used to be an area of suburbs for wealthy patrons. There were mansions here, there were upper class developments. It was a very fashionable yet rural place to be, and nothing like this was around. This gate marked the end of the gardens of York House, and where I'm standing, and this gravel area, would have been the north bank of the Thames, which at high tide would mean the water was lapping against these stairs here. Then in 1861 there was a development called the London and Thames Embankment, which moved the river way over there, about 150 metres. I'll walk down there in a minute to give you an idea of how far that is. But this is a beautiful piece of architecture by Inigo Jones, who was one of the foremost British architects in history. He was a Welshman and was particularly famous for the neoclassical style and the Italian style. This is one of the few examples of Italian style architecture that has survived from the Stuart period, the reign of Charles I, but it was incredibly popular in those days and almost immediately went out of fashion later that century, and almost all of it was torn down. This is an example that survived. Many of the rest was torn down to replace with Gothic and later styles and designs, so it's a wonderful survivor and very nice to see. I'm now going to go and walk down to the Thames to demonstrate just how far the Thames has moved. And here is the river. Slight detour because of crossing the road, but that's about 150 metres and demonstrates how far back the Victorians pushed the River Thames. It's important to remember that the River Thames at London is tidal, so there is a quite significant motion in the river, which would have meant that the Watergate at high tide would have been on the Thames, but at low tide would not have been far from where this embankment now stands. And it's a wonderful view from here. You've got St Paul's over there, you've got Shard, numerous other interesting towers, Somerset House and the Obelisk. It's a lovely view here from Embankment Station.